Ladies and gentlemen, last week we had a tragedy along the Seke road. The way this tragedy was handled by the government leaves a lot to be desired. It says a lot about how uncaring ZANU-PF government is. Look at it this way. What do you say when 17 Zimbabweans are flattened like cardboard beneath a truck? When steel crushes flesh and silence follows. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that screams louder than sirens that never came. Today, this commentary comes from a place of rage. Not just sadness, not just grief, rage. Because what happened on Seke Road on the 22nd of July 2025 was not a tragic accident. It was a slow motion massacre carried out not with bullets but with neglect, incompetence and total institutional collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, let's walk through it one sickening moment at a time. A massive truck, one of those mechanical dinosaurs that crawl across our roads without proper inspection, driven by men who have paid their way past VID, veered off its lane during morning rush hour on one of the busiest routes connecting Harare to Chitungwiza at the Hunyani Bridge. It lost control and fell like a hammer onto a fully loaded Nissan Caravan Combi. 15 people inside were instantly crushed. 2 pedestrians swept into the wreckage. Within seconds, 17 lives extinguished under twisted metal. Now, pause. Imagine you were there. Imagine hearing your fellow citizens crying for help under the truck. Screams, blood, chaos. And for 3 long agonizing hours, no ambulance, no crane, no fire brigade, no emergency response, nothing, zero. And when the rescue did finally come, not thanks to the state, not thanks to any rapid response unit funded by our taxes, no, it came because a journalist called around, begged, pushed, and basically became the de facto crisis manager. A journalist, mind you, not trained in trauma or disaster response, doing the work of a multi-million-dollar ministry with fleets, offices, directors, and a whole department of civil protection. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. The government of Zimbabwe was missing in action again. The police, probably busy collecting bribes on Mbare corners. The fire brigade, out of fuel. The fire ambulance, somewhere in a garage collecting dust next to broken municipal chairs and expired paracetamol. And then, just when you thought this couldn't get more insulting, along comes the Minister of Local Government, Daniel Gov't, who steps up to the podium and no, not to resign, not to launch an emergency commission of inquiry, not to declare national mourning, but to promise water. Yes, water for 2 days, like he's handing out party favors at a funeral. Imagine a father who just lost his wife and child in the crash, being told, sorry for your loss, here is some tap water. In a city where clean water is a constitutional right and 2-day water rations are treated like gifts from the gods. Pakatopuwa chema yemvura. This is what happens when you fill your cabinet not with visionaries or professionals but with praise singers, ex-Zanla caterers, and men who think governing is about taking photos at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Daniel Gov't, the same man who once suggested we change the constitution to extend the president's term, is now pretending to be a disaster manager, a bricklayer pretending to be an architect of urban safety. And here we are, paying for it in blood. Because this wasn't a random event, it was a direct consequence of the following: no national disaster response plan, no rapid deployment capacity, no centralized rescue equipment, no political will to fix any of it. And that leads us to the bigger question. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think Minister Daniel Garwe should be fired or forced to resign after this disaster? Comment below fired or resign and tell us who else you hold responsible for this national failure. Before we continue with this story, here are some of the interesting comments from past episodes.
Nyika yedu yaparadzwa nemakoronyerezano. Nyika yedu iri kutongwa nenhubu dzezano. Vana kushikorora ngova damberega rega mafekitari yakafara kare kare. Imi mwaiba bandini makati munozivavo konamo yeZimbabwe ichapera ni mambo tamirira taneta tichafara ni mambo tatari sanguva dzese uchauya ni mugovhe patinoti titaure tinodzwazve kuhondo kuti tikosore tinoswera tave musheri zanu haina tsitsi nevana veZimbabwe vatana nevarwere vakatokanganikwa kare ini mwari baba ndimi makati munozivavo konamo yeZimbabwe ichapera ni mambo tamirira taneta tichafara ni mambo tatari sanguva dzese uchauya ni mugove.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's go even deeper. Where was the crane? Where are the cranes that should be on standby across districts? This is a city that collects millions in toll gate fees, road license and municipal levies, and still can't afford one emergency crane near a major highway. Where were the ambulances? Not 2-3 weeks ago, we were paraded ambulances from Discovery and we were told that the nation has ambulances. Where were they when they were needed? 3 hours. An ambulance could actually come from Bulawayo to come to Harare in 3 hours. So, where were the ambulances? Oh wait, they were probably grounded. No fuel, no batteries, no tires, unless of course a chef's cousin needs a ride to a private clinic in Borode. Where is the road accident fund to take care of such things when they happen? That long talked about bill meant to guarantee emergency medical response after major accidents. This bill is still sitting in Parliament, probably underneath a pile of unpaid allowances and travel requests to Dubai. And this country has helicopters. Were we not told that Zimbabwe bought choppers from Russia? But on the day 17 people lay dying under steel, none appeared. Maybe they were being serviced. Or maybe they were somewhere over in Kariba escorting a VIP to his fishing holiday. The same thing happened when there was this Beit Bridge accident that happened. These air ambulances were nowhere to be seen. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about numbers. We had 17 dead. We had a 3-hour delay, and no officials were held accountable. Only one announcement was made, and that was for, wait for it, 2 days water supply in Chitungwiza and St. Mary's. And still, nobody's head has rolled. Nobody's seat is warm with pressure. Nobody's resignation letter has landed on the president's desk. Why? Because in Zimbabwe, failure is rewarded as long as you are loyal. You can burn hospitals, bury citizens under trucks, and still get a diplomatic passport. And don't get it twisted. This was never about one truck, one bridge, or one road. This is about a rotting system where ambulances are a luxury, cranes are mythical, fire trucks are decorative, and ministers are allergic to responsibility. If this happened in South Africa, the local mayor would have been roasted alive by the media. If it had happened in Botswana, there would be a judicial commission. In the UK, a national scandal. But in Zimbabwe, 2 days of water supply. Yeah. Where is our outrage, Zimbabweans? Where is the opposition? Why aren't they staging vigils at the crash site, demanding resignations and exposing ministerial failures? Instead, we have politicians celebrating by-elections, shaking hands with the ZANU-PF councillors in fake unity parades while 17 coffins are being closed. And the worst part? We have normalized this. We have reached the point where 3-hour emergency delays don't shock us anymore. We just say, that's Zimbabwe. This is another 3-hour delay. The other day, we were talking about another 3-hour delay for medication to be given to fungi. We shrug. We bury. We move on. And the cycle repeats. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford to move on. Because those 17 people, they weren't statistics. They were families, workers, brothers, mothers, children, now reduced to names on a funeral program because someone didn't do their job. This is where leadership matters, where systems save lives, where competence isn't a luxury, it's a survival. Imagine if the response time was 15 minutes. Imagine if a trauma helicopter had arrived. Imagine if the city had cranes stationed every 10 kilometers. Would all 17 still be alive? Maybe not all, but some, yes, absolutely. And that maybe is enough to know this didn't have to happen. At Zimwaves, we say, we do not want condolences. We want resignations. We want action. We want a nation that doesn't bury its citizens in excuses. Minister Gov't must go. The Permanent Secretary of Civil Protection must go. Every person responsible for that 3-hour delay should be suspended, investigated, and publicly named. And to the people of Zimbabwe, next time it won't be a stranger. It might be your child, your mother, your sibling, lying under steel, begging for help that never came. So next time you go to that ballot box, remember this incident. Let this be a line in the sand. Let this be the moment we all say enough. If you still think the government cares about you, look at Seke Road. Look at those 17 coffins. Look at the silence. Because in Zimbabwe, silence is policy and death is governance. Don't let this be forgotten. Share this video, comment your outrage, subscribe to Zimwaves TV. We don't just report, we fight too. Vana kushikorora ngova damberega rega mafeki tari akafara kare kare imi mwaiba bandini makati muno Zimbabwe konamo ye Zimbabwe ichapera ni mambo tamirira taneta tichafara ni mambo tatari sangu vadzese uchauya ni mugove atino titaure tino twashwe ku